welcome back to the White Mountain Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Heron, and we are joined today by Peter Bonito from Westmoreland, New Hampshire. How you doing this morning, Peter?
Oh, doing really well, Patrick. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on to chat. Yeah, a little bit more about your season with the White Mountain Endurance Cup, and then I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit more of your running background and journey the past few years, and then you've got a big race on the docket this weekend with Bubba's Backyard. So we'll touch on that a little bit. I'm sure the nerves are maybe a little high at the moment, but
Yeah, there's some interesting feelings going on around that one
yeah,
right now.
yeah. All right. Well, we'll stick to the positives, but yeah, I guess yeah. First off, just congrats on a strong season with the White Mountain Endurance Cup. It was pretty fun to see you throw down with several podium finishes and finished what do we end up with? 3 points back of Max for second overall
Yeah.
in the cup. Maybe a slightly sad ending for you, but still, still
A little
strong.
sad.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I guess we'll go maybe a little bit of a background. So from what I know of you as a runner, you've more been in that sort of 50K 50K, like I feel like 50K is your like go-to racing distance.
Yes. Yeah, that
Anything
was definitely
longer
my
too.
lane,
Okay.
I would say.
So yeah, way back, I was going through your ultra sign up, and I don't, maybe I put this together before, but I thought it was pretty cool that the first ultra you did, I was also at, and I didn't realize, I didn't know you at the time, but back in 2016 at the Drummer Hill 50K. And yeah, what was that your first trail race altogether, or take me back to that one?
Yes, that was my first trail race altogether. Um, I had done a couple road marathons. I was
Okay.
not a competitive runner at that point. Most of my running, building up to that was just for soccer. And then when I had kids, I backed off from soccer, but I kind of kept the running around as a way to stay fit and, compete locally, 5Ks, things like that. And then I actually saw that race being advertised in the newspaper.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't even know trail racing was a thing. I didn't know people ran over a marathon. I've always been one for a challenge. A lot of the marathons I did, I would do 4 or 5 training runs and then step in and see what I could do. I mean, the result was never good, but I made it to the finish line every time. And so my goal for that was just to show up and see what it was like, see what I could do. I was right at the town next door in Keene, so I figured why not. That was interesting. I didn't know that people ate when they ran. I had literally never consumed food while running before. I ran that whole race just drinking the Camelback hydration pack on my back and not eating anything. um, I think there was maybe only 12 of us in that 50K.
Yeah, because that was the
Uh,
first year of that event, right? I think.
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty new.
And I finished, I think, sixth. I was right in the middle of the pack. And I was like, well, right in the middle, that's not that great.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I didn't know that the people who were ahead of me knew what they were doing and had experience. And I was like, who's this youngster who just mopped the floor with me? Which would be you. Yeah, I remember you crushing that race. You still have the fastest time on any course on that in that race. So
Yeah, although it is cool because I was looking at your time. I think you ran what 5.5 or so hours the first year that you
yeah,
did it, and
yeah,
now you're like an hour plus faster than that.
yeah,
And
yeah. That last one I came close. I really wanted to get under 4.5, and I think I cramped maybe a couple 100 feet from the finish. And yeah, I'm such a cramper, and when I cramp in my abductors, and I'm not going anywhere when
yeah.
that happens. I'm so stuck in place, just watching time tick by, and it's just one of those things, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, so that obviously you I guess enjoyed it enough, or maybe you didn't enjoy and were like, oh, I need to improve. But for some reason or another, you returned to quite a bit more after that. Yeah, where were things at? Just like after that race, were you like quick to jump into more, or yeah,
Yeah, I really liked it. I really liked running in the woods a lot more than running on the road. I felt like it suited me more. I have done like some long distance backpacking previously before any of this, and so kind of like gave me those sorts of vibes, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. And so, I did enjoy it enough where I wanted to continue it, but the amount of training that I was putting in for those next couple of years was maybe like 10, 20 miles a week if I was lucky. Had another kid, moved, things are going on with the family. It's like, you got to have your priorities, and that was kind of the back seat, especially when the kids were young. So I think I did Pisgah. I think I did the 50K twice, and I think I did Drummer Hill again. While I was sort of in that like low volume, this is fun thing to do in addition to working and having young kids.
yeah,
Um, and then in 2019, like I really trained much harder for Pisgah. Putting in way more time out there. The kids were getting a little bit older, so I could get out there more. Maybe climbed up to like 40 miles a week in my training. And I came in third in that and was like really happy with my time. Had cut like an hour off of my time from the first time I did it. And I think it was that race and that experience and being up there with people that, I had looked up to in the sport and never thought I would be like competing with, that kind of like lit that fire for me. Like, okay, hey, maybe you're better at this than you thought you were. And with like some more work, who knows? At the same time thinking, okay, I'm starting this in like my mid 30s, you know, how's this going to work out for me? But I guess I've never really cared about how old I am or how old I'm supposed
yeah.
to be good at something. It felt good and I kept getting faster. So, hey, why not see like what the possibilities are?
Well, and soccer is definitely like if you're gonna pick any sport in terms of the like conversion from one sport into running, I feel like soccer is a pretty good one where it'll give you a good engine. And
Definitely.
yeah, I feel like there's quite a few soccer turned runners that yeah do pretty well, and just I feel like it also especially on trails too, just like you know, the I don't know, just the fast paced like back and forth nature of it, like probably works those muscles well. Where you're a little more.
Yeah, that like nimble footing and like having a lot coming at you
Yeah,
in the moment too. You're like replacing defenders with rocks and roots and things like that.
I like that. All right, so yeah, now we're in 2019. You feel like, all right, I could be good at this thing, and I guess the pandemic. Yeah, did was the pandemic like helpful towards your running? Did you feel like because I know for some people it worked either way, but for a lot of people it gave them more time to train and sort of hone in on their running. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, definitely. So being 2019, the year that race went well, it was only a couple months later where all of a sudden I'm finding myself at home doing like the distance learning with my kids because they're not in school at that point. Um, and so I was getting out every day at lunch because I was also working from home at that point. And that was the first time that I had run like every day and been like really consistent with my schedule and like just gradually, trying to be intelligent about how I was building up those miles and just like progressing in the volume. I still definitely had a lot to learn about like pacing and workouts and things like that. I mean, no background in running, so like I didn't know any of that stuff. I with soccer, it's like you're going 110% all the time, and so that's what I thought like training for running was supposed to be. I ended up hiring someone as a seasonal employee at my work, and they had like a cross country coaching background, and they were like, "When do you do your slow runs?" And I'm like, "What is a slow run? Like, aren't you just supposed to go fast every time?" So they kind of dropped some knowledge on me and pointed me in the right direction in terms of like maybe polarizing things a little bit more, and how to develop my speed a little bit more and not hit plateaus. And yeah, that was really helpful and kind of opened my eyes to what how training could be different and maybe what it should look like to be more successful.
Yeah. Would you say, like, training wise, and we'll get into maybe more of this later, but like, are you pretty regimented, or are you sort of go with the flow, just like depends on the week, or how do you approach things from a training perspective?
Yeah, I think I wish I was more regimented, that I could like write out a schedule for myself and really stick to it. Um, but I kind of have like an idea of what sort of volume I'm looking to hit, whether it's time or mileage. I love running lots of elevation, so the sort of vert that I'm looking to put in. And then, like, in more recent years, looking to, like, say, are there some workouts that I want to throw into this week? What are they? Do they actually have a purpose? Will they help me get better? Uh, and I still consider myself kind of new to this, and so I think I'm really still refining that, and will hopefully benefit more in the future from really like honing in a schedule and making sure I hit those workouts and making sure that I back off on the days that I'm supposed to be backing off.
Yeah. Yeah, easier said than done. I feel like it's always hard to to rein yourself in sometimes.
Yes,
But
definitely.
it does pay off for sure. Yeah, I'm curious too. Like, at what point, like early on or maybe later, did you sort of discover more of the community around running? Like, were you running with friends or clubs early on, or are you more of a solo runner most of the time? I feel like there is a pretty strong like community in New Hampshire, and I don't know specifically where you are if there's I know there's a few clubs I think in the area, but yeah, I'd love to hear like where sort of the running community fit into your own running journey.
Sure. Well, for the first couple of years, I think probably until like maybe the end of 2021, like I didn't have a watch, I didn't have any social media, I didn't have Strava. And so like if I ran with someone, it was because like they were out in the woods while I was out in the woods and we talked for a few minutes.
Yeah.
When I like got an actual like running watch and got Strava, that's when I saw that like, oh, hey, there are people around me who are doing similar things, because really like it was I'm at work, I'm with my family, or I'm getting my running in. And so there wasn't that like connection to what other people are doing in the running community. People at work are just telling me that I'm crazy, that sort of thing. And so, seeing, okay, there's other people out here, they're running on mountains, they're trail running, they're running long distances. And I just kind of like tried to insert myself into some of their conversations that were happening on Strava and that sort of thing. Don't be shy,
Yeah.
and just trying to make connections that way so that I could find people. I do definitely hold like a different schedule, I think. With my work schedule, I end up having Tuesday and Thursday off, and so those are like my big training days while my kids are at school, and most people are working during those times. And so, yeah, and especially in the beginning, like almost all my runs, I had a headlamp on, like once I wasn't working from home anymore and doing those lunch runs, like it was happening early in the morning or late at night. And so, most people don't necessarily want to sign up for that if they don't have
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
But I mean, I've made so many great connections over the last few years. That's been really wonderful. and to get that support from people, um, both in successes and in failures. It's nice to have a group sort of come in and pick you up when you feel like you've kind of failed at something. And also racing. Like if you're racing in New England, you're kind of seeing a lot of the same faces.
Yep.
At the 50K scene, or I kept seeing the same faces at during the Endurance Cup this past season, and so that was really nice. You get to connect to people there. You're spending that time with them. You're talking with them while you're racing, and yeah, I think that's been the two main ways.
Okay. Um, yeah, and I guess fast forwarding to this year, when did the Endurance Cup get on your radar? I know you. Well, yeah, I guess we'll start there, and yeah, I've got some follow up questions. But yeah, when did you first start thinking, oh, maybe this is something I'm going to explore this year?
Yeah, well, I was really happy with how my races went last year, but when I went to kind of like sign up for the same ones again, I wasn't excited about it. Do I just want to repeat the same thing that I'm doing? What are my motivations behind this? Am I doing them because I've been successful at them and I think I will continue to be? But is it really what I want to do to have fun? And so that's when I saw the cup. I think I was just looking at the Chikora mountain race, and I was like, oh, okay, they have this cup thing attached to it. That's fun. It's kind of like a season. They're connected in that way. Um, Chikora was full, but I just went and signed up for the other three. And I figured, oh, well, I'll put myself on the Chikora wait list and just see what happens. But ended up getting into that. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. I like to do one race per month. This is set up that way. This is like kind of when I think about racing, this style of racing, even though I don't know exactly what to expect, like that excites me. And probably like the unknown is part of the excitement behind that. What's it going to be like? Am I going to get totally destroyed out there? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
who knows what's going to happen? And I like that element to it. Knowing myself, I know I can get bored kind of easily. And so I just felt like I needed to like inject something different into it. Especially when I was training, like coming into the spring, I was like feeling a lack of motivation.
yeah.
Um, and this kind of like reignited that for me.
Yeah, I appreciated that you were like in quick to buy in. I think you were one of the first people to sign up for like
Totally.
all four of them right off the bat, and I feel like more people were of the approach of like, all right, maybe one or two, we'll see how it goes, and then yeah, then commit to more. But yeah, you were all in right from the beginning, which was awesome. Um, and yeah, what you were saying, like, I know back in February we saw each other at Frozen Yeti,
Oh yeah.
and yeah. So for those who don't know, Frozen Yeti 30 hour. It's in the middle of New England winter, and a 15-mile ish loop that you repeat for as many times as you can in 30 hours. And Peter was there. Was that, like, I imagine that your training and approach to that is pretty different. So come after that, well, I guess, yeah, just like coming off that, going from running for 29 hours and change straight, did you kind of, is that was that part of the impetus of like, oh, I want something pretty different from this? Or um,
I had signed up for that race as like I know it was a long way out, but it was like a Bubba's prep in a
yeah,
way, you know? Um, and I was really just like running kind of base miles at the time. So it seemed like a good opportunity just to like go out there and say, how's this going to go without like specifically training for this?
yeah,
But yeah, my volume was so high and I was just running all that base mileage. And it was sort of like after that race, I'm like, I want something fun. I want,
yeah,
not that that's not, but it's a different kind of fun, but a little more exciting, a little more fast pace. What's it like to run a race that takes less than 4 hours, like that sort of deal. So yeah, it did help to kind of kick me
Yeah.
in that direction a little bit.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think Kevin as well, right? Kevin McDonald, who
Oh yes, he
maybe,
ran incredibly well there.
yeah, like and I don't think I had put that together until recently, but he ran several of the cup races this summer, and then yeah, also took the win at Frozen Yeti with the 110 miles. But yeah, it's just I appreciate the versatility too of like people being open to switching it up, and there were several names on the Frozen Yeti results who also were running either cup races or other races in the White Mountain Endurance Series. And part of that's maybe just like we're a small enough scene in New England that there is a lot of crossover, but I feel like people are, yeah, like eager to try new things, which is always fun. Um, Cool. Well, I guess going into Chikura mountain race, you finished with, I think, if I remember correctly, a fifth place performance at that one. Is that right? Fifth, maybe?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And yeah, I think, well, yeah, what were your kind of takeaways from that one after finishing?
I felt good with fifth. Looking at the list of people who are supposed to be starting that race, I felt like, with this not necessarily being in my wheelhouse, if I can sit myself in the top 10 on this first race, I'd be happy with that and like ready to build on that for the rest of the season. My mountain running wasn't where I would have liked it to be, at that point to like really race that hard. So I feel like if I had gone back and raced that race, say at like the end of the season, I
Yeah.
think I could have put in a better time for sure. Yeah, that was kind of like a last minute sign up. But yeah, I was happy with it. I passed a lot of people towards the end. Um, and I think that like played into my endurance having like come from longer races. And so I at the same time I felt like maybe I went out a little too easy.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like teaching me that lesson. Okay, how should I start a race like this? What to do in the middle and then still wanting to be able to push at the end. But I mean, that second climb definitely beat me up a bit, trying to like hang on that at what I thought was a race effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, put a little hurting on my legs.
Yeah, it is tricky the pacing because it is still a 2.5, 3 hour race, which is like in the road world that's like a marathon or whatever. But
Right.
um, it also at the same time feels so fast paced, and so it is tricky where you're like, all right, I need to just be going, you know, hard the entire time, but also I've got to be able to be out here for 3 hours, and the fueling aspect of that while you're trying to fuel while also being at such high intensity, and yeah, just I feel like that one is yeah, just broken up with those two big climbs. But you sort of have a smaller, little punchy climb at the beginning, but nothing too big, and it's pretty quick. And then yeah,
Yes, it was very quick.
I
I
know,
think I
yeah.
was like, I think I was like 11th at the top of that climb, and I
Okay,
was like, man, these people are going fast. Like, are they going to do this the whole time? Like, I'm in trouble
yeah, yeah.
here.
Did when did you? And yeah, I'm curious too. What you say, like because you do have like a lot of leg speed. I feel like from what I know. But do you feel like you have like one area where you're strongest, like climbs, descents, runnable terrain? Like where do you feel like your current strengths lie?
Yeah, I thought my climbing was really strong, but I think it turned out that like climbing up hills is really strong for me and like not necessarily climbing up a whole mountain.
Yeah,
Like cuz a lot of the 50Ks I was doing that climb is over a lot sooner. You're just getting a lot more of them.
yeah,
And so I think I'm good at like hitting a shorter climb, repeating that. And these like climbs that were lasting much longer, like I don't think I was used to having myself up at sort of that threshold area for that long because, on like the hillier stuff, you're letting your heart rate drop back down on that downhill, even if you're pushing. And so that felt really different. And so I think I actually learned that descending was where I was making up a lot of my time
Okay.
here. Um, a lot of like lifting background for different sports, soccer and baseball, when I was younger. And so, like, I think my legs take that beating of running downhill well. And I like that feeling of going fast downhill. I'm also someone who kind of falls a lot. um, but I don't really mind that. I kind of like that. It reminds me of like contact sports. So I don't mind getting beat up a little. So I think this year, if I look at like, you can see segments in Strava, right, and see like what people did compared to you on the climbs and the descents, and it looked like the descents were really where I made up a lot of time on people on the races.
Okay.
But then also like the ones that had two climbs, my second climb, people who were beating me on the first climb, I was beating them on the second climb. And so I think my endurance from having done 50K or FKTs at longer distances, or a couple races where I've gone over 100, helped me to like have that endurance to keep pushing in the second half of those races.
Yeah, that part makes sense, like with the more ultra background where some people, because we had an interesting mix where some people were coming up in distance, some people's for the cup, like a lot of people I feel like who were in the top 10, like it was their longest race for several of them. But then we had people like you dropping down, or like Mike Conley, who had been doing a lot of more ultra stuff this summer,
Yeah.
and um, him dropping down. So yeah, it was cool that we had this somewhere in the middle. Um, but in fueling wise, like, do you feel like you've got your fueling and hydration like fairly dialed from your experience with running ultras for like, or yeah, not so much.
No, no, I'm terrible at
Okay.
it. I can't stand eating while I run.
Yeah.
Um, and I know I need to practice it more, like in my training. And like I just stay away from it because I don't like it, and I need to force myself to do it. Because for years I never ate while I was training either. And like maybe I'd like eat a date while I was running a race or something.
Yeah.
Like, you know. um, my hydration, it's been getting, it's all been getting better, but it's definitely a learning curve for me. And I've managed to dial it in fairly well for like a 50K distance, but I was finding myself up at like these threshold efforts a lot more often uh, in the cup races. And I think that like my stomach reacted to putting food into it differently in that sort of situation than it did when my heart rate was, a little bit lower,
Yeah.
right? It was able to like, stuff was able to settle in there more easily. Stuff definitely wanted to come back up on me quite a bit in these races.
And do you practice it all like with training, or like with the fueling and hydration, or tend to just kind of experiment on race day?
I have been doing more of it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's also a financial commitment,
Yeah.
that stuff is expensive. I'm like, well, I just want to buy enough for the race. But in reality, like if you want to race well, and fueling and hydration are clearly a big part of that, you got to practice that too.
Yeah.
So it's on my list to continue to get better at that because I know that will help me in the future.
Yeah, it seemed like that there is a theme with that this summer where people's fueling was always the crux of of their race. But it is tricky, yeah, with this middle distance where, like you said, like higher heart rate, higher intensity. Uh, yeah, it just can be a little harder to fuel, and just the variety of terrain. Like maybe you need the fuel on the the uphills, but you're going to have a harder time taking it down sometimes unless you back off a bit. So yeah, there's definitely a strategy there, but sometimes,
Yeah, hard to like pull out a gel and take it on some of those descents out there. You're like,
yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, yeah. So after Chikura, we had what next was Jigger Johnson in July. Did you do any other races in between those two, or um,
yeah, I was signed up to do the 25K at Drummer the week after Chikora, and I felt like that would be like a good back-to-back hard effort. I hurt my foot on Chikora, and I mean, it blew up. I could not get it in my racing shoes for that whole week. In between, on race day, I managed to shove it in there. The nice thing about Drummer is that you don't get penalized for like doing less laps than what you signed up for.
okay,
I went out there and ran the 12.5K, the first loop, like I was planning to do 25K, and made the decision based on how my foot was feeling that 12.5 was more than enough and that it would be a bad decision to continue. Um, and so, I stopped there and, continued into my training from there and like was taking it really easy on the downhills because that's what was bothering it, that more impact when I was landing. And it finally started to feel better like a week before Jigger Johnson. Um, but I had been training my uphills a lot more at that point, felt a lot more confident with that. Hit a couple downhills hard once it felt better in that week before Jigger and felt really good about those, felt like they were still there. And so I felt good going into that race. I feel like that race suited my skill set better than any other.
yeah.
It was, the longest distance. It was a nice mix of technical and more runnable stuff. Um, and, I think probably in retrospect, that's the race that went best for me.
Yeah, you definitely had. I mean, that was like result wise, your probably best performance, second overall there. But yeah, you also had a pretty. We were chatting with Max on the last episode, but I think you made a late pass on him in the closing
Yes.
miles.
Yeah.
And was that was after the second climb on the descent, or just right even at where? Yeah, how close to the finish did you end up passing?
Oh, man. So I came out of Tecumseh into the Waterville parking lot, which must be maybe like 2.5 miles from the finish there. Um, and there was a woman in the parking lot directing people to the turn, and she said, "Oh, the next person in front of you is about 2 minutes ahead." And I said, "Well, okay, I need to make up about a minute per
Yeah,
mile here, right?" But my legs felt really good coming off of that descent. That descent wasn't very technical. It was like a lot of steps made out of stones there, and so I felt really good and like just fast coming off of that and was able to drop a couple miles, in the lower sixes, those last 2 miles, and felt really strong. And I think I passed Max, like, remember where that tunnel
yep,
is?
yeah,
Like right before you get to the bridge on the way back. I mean, it's like I don't know, less than a half a mile out,
okay,
probably. Um, I just took that momentum and said, make a hard pass, make it so that he doesn't
yeah,
want to chase you at all. I could feel my legs wanting to cramp up. I said, just make it to the finish line. I was talking to them, and then you can cramp all you want. Uh, and I saw the video of the finish, and like as soon as I crossed the finish line, I'm just like, oh, my
I
legs.
know.
And then
You
they
just
just like
grabbed your
locked
leg.
on me.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's fine. Like, whatever they want to do now, I don't care. Like,
Was it just cramping? I was worried when because I was taking that video and I was like, oh, geez, I hope it's not like something worse, but it was just cramping.
oh no, it was just
Okay,
cramping.
that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I was like, did he pull something or what happened?
No, I just let them completely take over at that point. And, oh
Yeah.
man, if you've had them, you know how good it feels.
No, that was fun to see you come blazing in, and yeah, because for us, we only get like a few. just with the remoteness of the course, so a few updates from maybe like, I don't know, two or three spots along the course of how people are doing, and then there's these big gaps of like, oh, we don't know what's happening out there,
Right,
and you
right.
just like, you know, at the finish, just like who's gonna come around the bend, and so yeah, it was fun to see you, yeah, have a solid day out there, and yeah, I guess we'll dive into the next two. So Baldface, and then Kilkenny. Um, Baldface. You ended up with what, fourth place, I think, in the
Fourth.
men's
Yeah.
field. Then Kilkenny, a second. Um, yeah, with Baldface first, how did that play out for you?
I had been to Baldface, I think when I was in college to hike it, and I remember like the scramble portion and all that, and I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting race. And I went out there and I previewed the course, and like, you know, I wasn't like scared, but like to say that like a course scared me a little bit, that would be the one, right? Because like parts of that are so technical, and like I'm still learning to improve at like my footing on stuff like that and like taking stuff like that at a race pace. And
Yeah,
I'm like, if I'm going to go down hard in any race, like this is a race I'm going to go down hard in. Um, but I tried to practice those things, like get out on Monadnock and get on the more technical trails there and practice those things so that I was in a good position coming into that. I knew my friend Travis was going to be there, and I know he's a beast on that terrain. So, I had a feeling he was going to tear that course up, which he did. But I actually felt really good about that one too. I felt in terms of like how comfortable I was on that terrain, or uncomfortable rather, that like I raced it well.
yeah,
And I ran it much better than when I went up there and previewed it.
okay.
And felt a lot stronger on that day. So, I was pretty happy to take fourth. I think I was maybe 2 minutes behind Max on that one. So again, we were like very close to each other there.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty tight race, which was fun, and yeah, at that point, with being the third race in the cup, I feel like everyone was familiar sort of with their competition, at least more so than the first two races, where it's like, all right, like you just said, like Max is the guy to look out for, or Mike is the guy to look out for. But everyone
Right,
was
right.
like becoming, there was this camaraderie, but also like, the competitiveness as well between all of you guys, and on the women's side as well. So that I feel like added some fun dynamics where it was like, you guys are buddies, you're chatting it up at the start or in the early miles, but then it's like, all right, gotta have the game face and slow
Right.
down. So yeah, I'm curious, like your experience with that out there, just like both racing as friends, but also as competitors.
I love that part about it. It's great getting to meet those people, the like-minded people who like to do the same thing, sharing that experience. At the same time, I love competition, and so getting out there with people that like to compete as well. It's like you can have that friendly relationship and at the same time be cool with like trying to push each other and trying to one up each other, and obviously you're trying to finish in front of the other person, and that's sort of like an unspoken agreement going into it, right? This is a race, this is what we're trying to do, like nothing personal, and so you can go and hit it the way that you want to and then just be cool afterwards.
Yeah,
And I think I really like that about trail racing. There's just like that really nice vibe to the people and the culture of it. It's extremely supportive, and like people are out there to compete, yes, and work hard, but they're also out there to like have a good time and be there for each other, and like not necessarily to like, brag about being the best or that sort of thing.
yeah, well said. No, I that's definitely what keeps me coming back to trail racing and the community, and it's just fun to, yeah, even when you're on the sidelines to see that unfold. Cool. Well, lastly, a Kilkenny, which coming into that race, was in terms of the leaderboards for the cup, it was super close on both men's and women's
Yes.
side. Yeah, like definitely. I mean, there is. Were you were tied with Mike? Is that
I was
correct?
tied with Mike.
Okay,
Yes.
tied with Mike.
Um, and it looked like Max was 10 points back, but
Yep.
if you knew that a race was getting dropped and you looked at his Chikora race, you knew that he was right there with us and not really 10 points back like it made it
Yep.
seem like he was. Um, and I'm a math person. I like math, so I knew exactly like what needed to happen there. I trained hard for Kilkenny, and I felt the most confident coming into that race of any race that season. And that's the thing with racing. You get one day to get it right, and I didn't get it right that day. And it's easier to laugh about it now because it was kind of like a comedy of errors out there, right? But
Yeah.
definitely at the finish of the race, I was disappointed because I felt like I knew a time that I could hit on that course. I went and previewed that one as well, and I didn't really come close at all to that time. And so I'm a competitive person, and I think I'm most competitive with myself. And so, like, falling short of that goal that I had set for myself was really, I think, where most of my disappointment came from
Yeah.
with that one.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and thinking of it, the course, I feel like it, well, you're saying Jigger like suited you maybe the best. I feel like maybe Kilkenny would be after that, where I feel like it is like it's fairly runnable, I guess, in some regard. Like it is very technical, but the climbs are not the grade of them is like lesser than some of the other
Definitely.
climbs from this season, and you can kind of find a good flow out there. And then you have the really quick opening miles. That first 2.5 or so miles that
Yeah.
are just really, really fast. And yeah, we were chatting with Max, and I think he said shortly after I saw you guys around 2.5, like pretty quickly upon entering the single track and starting the climb is I think where he said he started to try to make a move on you guys. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we came into the woods there, and there's that bridge, and it's a nice bridge. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
not one of these janky ones. It's like good condition, and we were moving pretty quick, and I just caught my toe
Oh
on that
yes, yeah, yeah. I was ahead of you
unexpectedly.
guys, I
Like,
think, filming Abby, and I heard that crash behind
yeah,
me.
that was me, like
Okay.
crashing to the ground. Everything came flying out of my vest, like sprawling across the forest floor. It just like it took me out of it.
Yeah,
Like trying to get my pace back and get back into a groove after that. Like when Max took off, I just didn't feel like
yeah,
I could go with him. And I was bummed because the first couple of miles leading up to that, I felt good. I felt strong. I felt like things were going to come together that day. And, just I think like the unexpected nature of that
yeah,
fall, I did not expect to be on the ground at that point. Like maybe coming off of the top of Cabot, where it's like pretty nasty at the
yeah,
beginning of that descent. Like that's where I'd expect to be on the ground. But like not at this point. And I just felt like my heart rate spike up and
yeah,
couldn't get it to like settle back down. And then you kind of have the panic of like, okay, like people are still in the groove, they're getting ahead of me, like, and then it just like deteriorated from there. I mean, just to like finish and get second that day
yeah,
was a success in its own,
yeah.
based on how the rest of it sort of unraveled.
Did you just sort of just feel like you were playing catch up from that point on, like where you were, you know, like you said, it was hard to sort of get back in the groove, and you're just felt like the race had gotten away from you at that point, or
I mean, I definitely felt like Max had gotten away from
yeah,
me at that point, and I knew that was like my person that I needed to stay with. I don't mind being behind. Like in 50Ks, I definitely like to let people like go out and then catch up to them later on.
yeah,
But climbing up Cabot, that shouldn't have been that hard of a climb for me. And man, I just felt like I was giving like an all out effort to move at like not a very fast pace.
yeah,
When my heart rate got up after that fall, it just never got back down. Because then I'm like, definitely let probably my emotions get a little bit of the best of me there. Like in this, like, all right, you got to catch back up. You got to catch back up. Like, don't lose that front pack. And then it was just too much going into that climb, and I climbed that a lot slower than I expected to,
mhm,
with a lot higher heart rate than I expected to. And the descents went fine. I feel like the descending was well. That's where I kind of like pushed ahead
yeah,
of the people who were ended up, third, fourth, fifth. And so that was okay. But I feel like any time I hit a climb, it was just like it was gross.
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I think Haley was mentioning you guys teamed up a little bit, or were at least like pretty close to one another for some portions of that.
Yeah, we had a lot of back and forth going. She would pass me on the climbs, and then I'd pass her
Okay.
on the downhill, and then we'd climb again. She'd pass me, and I'd pass her on the downhill. But I know, what a strong athlete she is, and so, at that point, I was kind of telling myself, uh, you know, keep her in sight on the uphills, and then push the downhills. And if you do that, you should be able to hold like a pretty consistent pace that'll still get you in like a decent position at the end of this race. So just kind of hung on to that. And yeah, it was kind of nice having that person out there to share the suffering. I could see the point where we both kind of like shortened our stride to try to avoid like onset of cramps and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, suffering together.
Nice. Yeah, always better together. Cool. Yeah, at that point, I was, we, we were all eagerly at the finish, just like, all right, who's it gonna be? We had gotten the update from maybe 7 miles out, that last aid station that you guys came through, and from there it was like most well, there's a yeah, the last few miles are pretty downhill, and but from what I gathered from people, even though like it seems like it should be maybe more runnable in theory, like it was sort of slower going some of those final miles. Or yeah, what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, like you go through a couple like swampy sort of areas
Yeah,
there. When I previewed the course, I was like, I'm definitely gonna fall in the
yeah,
swamp in like one of these sort of interesting like slippery log crossings. And often when you get around those areas, you get like a lot of sort of just like smaller boulders sticking up out of the ground, and I would say that I struggle in areas that are like that. If it's rocks that I'm dealing with, I'm much better on slabs.
yeah,
And then the very runnable part of the descent was quite muddy. And so, you get into a groove and then you get like your legs sucked into a little bit of a mud pit and then get into a groove
yeah,
and it's just like repeat this action sort of thing over and over. But I was happy to have that long downhill at the end because my legs seemed to be more interested in doing that than
yeah.
going up.
Fine.
So.
And you said you were a math guy. So what was the we were trying to figure it out at the finish, like sort of on the fly. The percentage I think was around you had to be within 5% or so of maxes.
Yeah, I think I needed to be maybe within 4% to tie
Okay,
him, and then like 3% or above to
to
win.
win.
And so I knew I didn't actually have to beat him. I just needed to be within that percentage. And I tried to guess how many minutes that would be based on what I thought like the winning finish time would be, which was approximately where it was.
Yeah,
And so, I had the sense that I wasn't there.
yeah,
I had the feeling that I was probably like 8 to 12 minutes back. at the finish. And I think I was right around 10.
Yeah.
And so I think it, ended up being pretty accurate to what I was thinking. And I knew when I crossed that, looking at how like refreshed Max looks, I knew he had been there for a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
while. So, I was like, oh yeah, if he looks like that, it's enough minutes where, he took first and I took second for the whole thing. But he's a really nice guy, and he came out and battled back from having a race that I don't think was one that he wanted to have in the first race in Chicora, to show up and then for the rest of the races really show, you know, that he deserved to be there, and then to come out and do exactly what he needed to do in that last
Yeah.
race. Kudos to him because he pulled that off perfectly. Perfect comeback, and then just sealed it with a win at the end. So,
Yeah, no, it
he
was a
did.
pretty like, you know, picture perfect, just like trajectory where it's like, all right,
Right.
just every race he improved, and then yeah, like you said, really nailed it on the last one. And you guys came at it from very different approaches. All of these were the longest races by far that he'd ever done, and also living in the Boston area, training on the Charles River with like little to no elevation, and yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Where he was, I mean, he had a few like trips up to the whites in between some of the races, but for the most part was kind of relying on just being like as fit and fast like as possible and letting that fitness carry him.
Yeah, I
So
was super impressed.
yeah,
I was like, man, this guy's really good at mountain running for like doing very little mountain running.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was cool. And so I'm like, yeah, exactly. You're like, okay, get this guy a little bit more trail time, and like what would he be able to
Yeah,
do?
right. What's he capable of? Yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, I know maybe not the ending you were hoping for, but still, yeah, it was a really, strong showing over the whole season, and did make for an exciting last race. You were on
Thank you.
the,
Yeah, appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, at the beginning I told myself if I podium in this, that's a good result. And then I went into that last race feeling like I can win this thing. And so now a couple weeks out, I'm trying to remind myself that like I did actually achieve that
yeah,
initial goal. And so, you know, as the memories of the last race fade, I'll sort of bring in new, feelings of feeling better about the whole thing went, I think.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess looking ahead toward like 2025, do you have interest in either, returning to some of the cup races or trying other shorter distance like efforts similar to the cup, or are you more planning on going back to your ultra ways, or I guess we'll dive into Bubba's in a little bit, but yeah, when you look toward 2025, do you have any initial plans?
Uh, you know what? I don't. That's a really good question. Like, I know I want to stay with the mountain running. And so I guess the question for me is going to be what distance do I want to do?
Yeah,
Do I want to stick to these shorter ones, or do I maybe want to try, one of the longer jigger races or one of the longer Kilkenny races that I probably would have done, in years past if I had signed up for one of those events. But really, I've kind of just had blinders on for Bubba's these last 3 weeks, trying to get myself in the right headspace because that is that one's not just a physical beatdown, but a mental beatdown.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Let's dive right into Bubba's. So coming off of Kilkenny, yeah, that was what a 3 weeks, like you said, or was it 3 weeks from or 4 weeks?
it'll be like 3 weeks on race day this Saturday, I
Okay.
believe.
So yeah, pretty quick turnaround to recover from, that race to then trying to maybe squeeze a little bit of a training block in for 2 weeks or
Yeah.
whatever. And just kind of a big mental like shift as well, from racing for 2 to 3 hours for last year, um, what you ended up going for 30 hours, I think. Is that
Yeah, I think I timed out on my 31st lap.
okay?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess let's go back to last year's race, and then we'll go into this year's. But for last year's Bubba's, yeah, so you ended up with 30 hours. I also thought it was funny. Aaron Copeland from
Oh
Ball.
yeah.
Yeah, the two of you guys both ended up at 30 hours, so that was cool seeing his name on there. Um, but yeah, ninth overall. You know, got over 100, so that's awesome. That was your first time over 100, is that right?
Oh yeah. I had only run like 50 miles at the most, I think, and then like 3 weeks before Bubba's last year, I did an FKT that was 75 miles,
Okay.
and then jumped it up over 100 at Bubba's. So it was just like, why not?
Yeah.
Just go for it.
So last year, yeah, would you say like with that what was it pretty like you were just kind of it was totally new territory and you were just happy with whatever you could get out there, or did you have like specific intentions going into it?
I mean, I wanted to win
Yeah.
that race, so you know. Um, I love the concept. I think it's so diabolical in how simple it is, and like how that simplicity can just turn into like such a challenge. So I really like the idea of it, and when I saw there was a few spaces left back whenever I registered for it, I was like, all right, let's give this a try. Enough thinking about how much you'd like something like this.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what it's actually like. Um, you know, I had some strategy going into it, but that was really based on nothing tangible. It was just, what do I think will help me do well at this? Definitely learned a lot of lessons from that one that I'll hopefully bring in and turn into more successes in this year's version.
What were some of
I
those
think probably,
lessons? What were the big ones that you took away?
well, everyone was giving me the advice to like eat solid food, like make sure you eat real food. And when I did that, I just felt terrible. Um, not that I'm like not eating real food, but like more like complex foods, like eating rice instead of like a simple sugar or something like that. Eating like a concentrated protein, even like a meat or something, instead of like trying to get it through like nuts or seeds or something like that. Which would be more of like my day to day diet, but like not what I'd be comfortable with when I'm out there running. So I think I tried to like force some things in that ended up like kind of backfiring on me. And so definitely sticking to like just what I know I'm comfortable with when I'm out there moving for this year's nutrition. I felt like hydration went really well last year, so I'll
Okay.
just hope to kind of stick with that. I think it is supposed to be a little bit warmer this year. Maybe I saw 70 degrees for Saturday. Um, so making sure that I stay on top of my hydration. And then I think, I really got just kind of like beat up in the mud last year. Felt like every step you were slipping backwards a little bit. And, I remember waking up the morning after the race and not being sore in any of my major muscles, but all my little stabilizers
Yeah.
and tendons and things like that were like really shouting at me. And I think that was from all that little slipping. And so, what really took me out at the end wasn't that I was like exhausted or anything. It was just that my cadence was reduced to such a thing that I just couldn't make it around the loop fast enough. Um, and so I think like making sure that I bring things to like help keep myself mobile as
Yeah.
those hours go on will be really helpful. But the conditions also look a lot better, and so maybe just not having all that slipping and sliding around will take part of that out of the equation for me as well.
Yeah. And did you have any issues with like sort of the sleep deprivation aspect? Getting up upwards of 24 hours. You were out there for 30 plus hours. Did you struggle with that, or
I thought that would bother me, but it didn't bother me.
Okay.
That surprised me. I like my sleep. Like
Yeah.
I went a lot of years not sleeping that well when my kids were young, and so like now that they're sleeping well and I get to sleep at night, I'm like, oh, this is a precious thing. Um, but that didn't really get to me.
Okay.
Um, I did do one training run for Bubba's this year, besides like Frozen Yeti way back in February. Last weekend, I ran like a hard 25K effort on Friday at work at lunch, and then ran an overnight, like really slow paced marathon, and went like 25 hours or something without sleep just to sort of
Yeah.
remind my body what that felt like, um, before doing it when it really, really matters. So,
Yeah. And do you practice at all the sort of those short repetitive loops, or no, you just kind of stick to your regular runs and routes?
I mean, had I not had the race schedule that I had, I probably, this was like a goal, everything that I was focused
Yeah.
on, I think I would have done like training specific to it. But I felt like I was putting like enough time on my feet
Yeah.
training where as long as I can like, battle the mental aspects of it and the sleep deprivation and that sort of thing, that, my body like physically should be in a good position to go out there and, put a lot of miles in. At
Yeah.
least that's the hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you uh, rely on? Do you have crew that will be out there supporting you, or what's your approach for
Yeah.
crew?
Yeah, I do have crew. My buddy Kevin, who crewed me last year, will be back again this year. And then two friends, Randy and Ryan, who I actually went to high school with and then ended up connecting more with in recent years, just based on like a mutual love for trail running, ultra running. They're coming out as well. So yeah, should be awesome.
Yeah.
They each have like their own thing that they offer and their own style. And we had a like a Zoom meeting the other night,
Nice.
the group of us, and so like they're all in, and it's awesome to and humbling to sort of get that support from people and have them actually be that interested in what you're doing, that they're willing to give you that sort of time commitment.
Yeah.
That's like a really uh, pretty incredible thing, I think.
Did you have crew at last year's event, or is this a upgrade for this year?
So my friend Kevin was there last year, and I had two other people, but they ended up signing up for the race as kind of like a way to make sure that they showed up. Uh, and they didn't make it particularly far, but it was far for them. I think it was PR
Yeah.
distances for them, and they were so worn
Yeah.
after that like they just kind of like had some beers and tucked in for the night.
Yeah.
And so Kevin was really like flying solo. So I'm glad that this year he's got a couple other guys who are like, the main focus is like the crew.
Yeah.
And that way, like maybe he'll be able to get some sleep this year, and the other guys, and they'll be able to like trade shifts and stay fresh. And yeah, I think it's a better setup this year.
Nice. Wow, this is
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah. No, and I was looking at the field this year. I mean, there's always plenty of returners at Bubba's, but there's also like, I feel like some of the big names from prior years are not returning, and
Right. The
so
biggest one of all,
yeah, yeah,
really. I mean,
exactly.
which kind of just like leaves it wide open, right? It's like, well, not that he's guaranteed a victory, but anything, I mean, anything could happen now, right?
Yeah. So, do you have like, yeah, who are the names of people that you I don't know that you worry about, come 100 plus miles. Who are, yeah, some of the names that you think are going to be in the mix? Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, the captain from last year, he wears the captain hat, Connor.
Connor, yeah,
I got to run with him some, just like some training runs this year. Really nice guy. Uh, Big engine on him, he can run all day. Really strong too, strong on trails. So I think he ended up going out last year, maybe because of an injury. Um, and so I'm expecting a lot out of him. I can't remember his name, but I know he has the number one bib jersey this year because he was like the one who went the furthest, who's returning. He's young as well, I think, maybe 22, 23, and it looks like he has quite the engine on him
Yeah.
too. So I would expect big things.
Yeah.
I think Mia Buckingham, she
Yeah.
was the top female finisher last year. She's returning. She looked so strong last year the whole time. So I'm expecting a similar performance from her. There's Aaron, who you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
and Ian. We were like, I think, 7, 8, 9 last year. And so the three of us coming back. Um, I saw Joey Miller's on
Oh
there.
yeah.
I don't know him personally, but I know that he's got like uh, quite a history of like 100-mile victories, and I got to race him at nationals for the 50K distance at Ragged last year,
Okay.
and he was fourth, I was fifth, so he was a couple minutes in front of me. But that's the only experience I have against him. But just like looking at his history, knowing his ability, I expect big things
Yeah.
from him. Um, I'm probably forgetting some people, but those are the ones who
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
come to
There's
mind
always
right
some
away.
dark horses too. People who maybe have like no ranking on Ultra Sign Up who just come out of the woodwork and surprise
Right.
people. And um, yeah. No. And do you have? I mean, what's the course record? You probably maybe know it.
I think it's
See if I can pull it up
I want to say it's like 157 or something like that.
here. Okay.
Um, but I might be misquoting that. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
certain. I think it's like 42 hours, whatever that
42 hours.
comes out to.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna pull it up here and see. Ooh,
I know it's Ed, and I think Brian Burke was like right behind,
with
was his assist that year.
I know Brian I was texting with him earlier. He's got another 100 this weekend, Arkansas 100, but I was hoping to see him back in the mix because he's always a top contender, and he's gotten a lot of assists. I feel like over the years. So
Yes.
yeah,
So he did take that one, Amy's race for DFL, right? Did he get the
yes,
win?
yes, yeah,
And
with
that, I
Amy
think it
Grip.
was him and
So yeah,
Dan Grip, and
yep.
Dan got the assist. Yeah,
All right, so 157.5 miles. Yeah, 2021 with Ed Clifford. Okay. All right. Do you
yeah. I
have
mean,
like
it's a big number. 157 is a big number.
is that in the cards, Peter? Could you see yourself going, 150
I can
plus?
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine myself going that far. Obviously things need to fall into place.
Yeah.
All the variables need to go right to make that happen. And so, but I guess like the initial part of that is, do you even think you're capable of that if things go right? And yeah, I do think I
Yeah.
could push out that mileage if things went right.
Yeah, no, I think you need to like, if you're going like you said if you're in it to win it, like you need to honestly like not even have like a upper limit to what you think you can do in a way. Like I feel like that can be some people's detriment where they're like, okay, I can get to whatever 150 miles or something. Then they get there and then people are still going and it's like if you didn't think you could get beyond that, it's like almost a mental thing where it's like, oh, so I'm always like,
Definitely.
just don't have like a limit in mind, or
I agree.
just do
Yeah.
something crazy, like like Harvey Lewis, 450 miles or whatever. But yeah, I feel like you're
Right.
better off not having that number, because otherwise it becomes this sort of self limiter in a way.
Yeah, and it gives you almost like a mental excuse to say, okay, I got to where I thought
Yeah,
I could get to. yeah, like a lot of people at work who know about it will be like, well, what's a distance you'll be happy with? And I'm like, well, whatever one wins the
Yeah,
race is the
yeah.
distance I'll be happy with. Not that winning is everything, but if you're putting in this sort of time and commitment and really going for it, like that's where I have my sights set.
Totally. I love it. What is the next 2 day or yeah, I mean we're less than 48 hours from the start. What's it look like for you?
I'm just trying to take it easy,
Yeah.
take in the fluids, take in the calories, give my legs probably a much needed rest. I don't rest them very often. Um, I took Friday off from work so I can get up there and set up in the afternoon. So really, it's just I coach soccer right now, so I got soccer practice this afternoon, but I got tomorrow off from that too. So it's just do the little things, make the kids lunches, make them dinner,
Yeah.
get the soccer practice in, make sure I get enough sleep. Make sure I have a comprehensive list of the things that I'll need and try to remember to pack it all, and just try not to stress
Yeah.
too much about it. What's done is done at this point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just got to go out there and give it my best effort, right? See how it unfolds.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, I know I'm considering going up there for the weekend just to be there in person because I've usually just followed the updates on, social media virtually, and you're always like, ah, geez, I want to be there. Although when you're there in person too, it's always like, it's such a funny format because, you see people for what, 10 minutes and then they're just gone.
Right.
They're just hanging out. But it is, I just went to one this past weekend in Needham, Massachusetts, the Metro West Backyard Ultra, which is a newer event, and that standard 4.16 format.
Yeah.
And yeah, once you're there, you get hooked. You're just like, I need to know who's going to be the final person.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I'll either be up there in person to cheer you on, or I'll be supporting you virtually. But yeah, excited
Nice.
to see what you throw down out there.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, Peter, chatting, and yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, and for racing the White Mountain Endurance Cup, helping it get on the map this first year. So hopefully we'll see you back for at least some of the events in 2020.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Maybe all four. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta claim that title. It's yours for the taking. Awesome. Well, yeah, rest up these next 2 days, and yeah, good luck at Bubba's.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, awesome.